To my left is Mr. N. Venkatram. He's the managing partner and CEO of Deloitte. Mr. Cyril Shroff, managing partner of Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Mrs. Kalpana Modparia, CEO JP Morgan, South Asia and India. Mr. Uday Kotak, who's no stranger on these panels, Executive Vice Chairman and MD, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Vijay Shekhar Sharma, founder and CEO of Paytm. And last but not the least, Bhavish Agarwal, co-founder and CEO of Ola Cabs, the David that is taking on the Goliath, so to say. So picture yourself in your mind as to what is it that comes to you when you hear the word disruption. It seems to be, the topic for this evening is actually growth amidst disruption. So if you look at disruption and if you hear the word, you would picture something that is cataclysmic, that is negative, that's bad, that's going to be ruinous for everybody. But think of it this way. Think of all the major achievements and all the major changes that have happened in the world of business and in the world of everything, entertainment, sports. What would one-day cricket be without Kerry Packer and night cricket? What would we be doing without smartphones, for instance? What would we be doing without internet and e-commerce? And what would we be doing without Elon Musk and Tesla? And I'll come back to Elon Musk and Tesla probably towards the end of the discussion. Vijay, what is your experience about, and you deal with a lot of small merchants, small traders, small shopkeepers. Yeah. What is your experience of the kind of change that they have undergone? You know, it's one thing to say that the big industry and the big companies are doing well. They will do well, they have the resources. But what are the small guys? What is your feedback?
India is ready for the disruption because Indians at large, whether consumers, whether merchants, whether businesses, are ready to accept the new.
Indian merchants and Indian businesses are ready to accept the new India, the new change that is taking place here. Mrs. Modparia, if I could come to you, the changes that we have seen so far, what is the global perspective that, since you would be talking to a lot of people within your organization and with the global community, what is the global perspective on these things?
I think India is one of the most attractive stories today. Right. And it's not just with financial investors, portfolio investors, or PE investors. I mean, they are all queuing up to invest. But I doubt whether there is any board amongst the Fortune 500 that today is not talking about an India business vision. Right. So I think in terms of what the country offers for potential, I think it doesn't have a rival at all. Right. I mean, China is there, but India offers a distinctive, more attractive story today. But I do want to say something about disruption and you know, what we saw in the last 1 year. So those of us who've been around for a very long time, 1991 was a seminal moment in our lives when you know, the license permit Raj was abolished. I would say that the changes that we've seen in the last 1 year are actually far more dramatic to my mind, because this is for the first time where India is attempting Bharat to move in step with India. Whether it is our journey on financial inclusion, what it is that we are doing with the GST. I mean, if you now have informal workers come up to you as to say, I have my GSTN number, abhi main bill raise karunga, to iske saath raise karunga. Right. It's a completely different story. What Paytm has demonstrated in the aftermath of the demonetization, just across the board, and affordable housing, the other great story that's going to pan out. I think now, you know, we still talk about India and Bharat, it's going to get woven into one.
It's woven into one, and you're talking about actually a bottom-up change that is happening from the ground. Mr. Venkatram, your views on what, how much has India Inc. changed in the last 1 year? You would see it from a different perspective.
Well, I would say that once again we proved that we are very resilient. I think the resilience of India shows through. Right. And yes, in the initial days of demonetization, there was concern. Right. Yes, we still were very concerned about how GST would roll out and, you know, all the forms and everything else that would go with it. But everybody does realize that India is in the long term a growth story. There are many, many more years of growth in India. And that even though you say that you would have a bit of a slowdown now for a very brief period of time, but it will correct over time, regardless of whether you say it's because of initially demonetization or GST.
Right. But is a slowdown also taking too much of mind space, too much of attention, not just in the stock market, but maybe not so much in the stock market, but among the other, the business community? Is a slowdown that we are experiencing taking too much of mind space?
I don't think so, not at all. I think that everybody is rightly looking more at their medium and long-term plans. And there is actually a lot of growth which is still yet to happen. There are a lot of large companies that will come in, I think that we haven't really seen the manufacturing revolution yet.
Right.
And that is really something that we should be concentrating on.
Right, right. Mr. Shroff, you have a ringside view of all the changes that are taking place in India Inc. What is your view on how the medium and the small companies have adapted to this change?
If I can just step back a bit, and when you use the word disruption, what comes to my mind is a lot of mindsets of business people and corporate India. And they sort of fall into sort of two buckets, people who think they're going to be winners and others who think they're going to be kind of losers. And those who think about the possibility of winning, I think in terms of the sheer scale of how they see the opportunity, it is enormous. And it is prompting them to take bold decisions. I think it is prompting them to sort of think differently as well. I mean, you can look at some of the folks on this panel as well. They are beneficiaries of that kind of mindset and thinking. The second thought that comes to mind is that a lot of this has been driven by bold policy change. The sort of things which Kalpana mentioned in terms of the changes that have been looked at, whether it's GST or the bankruptcy code or the abolition of the FIPB, and you just add that all up.
Right.
I think it's a very significant pile of fairly deep changes that have happened. And all of these deep changes are manifesting themselves in the mind of the entrepreneur. How are the entrepreneurs? A lot of folks who are sitting here as well, how is it actually impacting them? And therefore they are seeing not only growth, but they're also seeing big risks as well. That being said, still the bottom line remains that India is one of the biggest opportunities. When we talk to a lot of our foreign clients, they see this as a massive opportunity. They see execution challenges as well. The longer term is looking better than the shorter term, but overall it's a very positive feeling about India.
Very positive feeling about India, big growth and big risks. Bhavesh, if I could come to you, the changes that Cyril talked about, entrepreneurs and the mind of the entrepreneur and how he's adapting and changing to the revolution or the change that's happening.
So again, I would like to step back and add a point on the disruption piece.
Sure.
The debate is focused on disruption. I'm obviously biased, but one thing that both Vijay and me have benefited from is how technology is being used so much more in businesses, and it's becoming, there's a bit of a democratization of technology that's happening because of mobile data being more penetrated, because of cheap handsets. Mobile is the true screen in which the Indian consumer is now consuming. Before this, we never had direct access. Distribution was a challenge. Right. So, I see this every day in our business that because of technology, we are able to reach many more consumers, build more smarter business models. Right. And I feel these will continue to happen. Technologies like AI, etc. I feel are an opportunity for our country to adapt them quickly and take more penetration, take the limited resources we have much deeper into the country. So I would underline the technology theme.
You would underline the technology thing, but if I could just ask you, since you are dealing with a very different set of customers and different set of people, the acceptability of this change and of this technological change, how widespread and how deep is it?
I think the one person who really matters to this is the end consumer, right? And the end consumer, especially Indian consumers, they are able to adopt the relevant technologies very, very fast. Right. And I think we've seen that in sector after sector. So as long as the end consumer adopts it, the businesses will find a way to use the technology.
The businesses will find a way to use it. I want to go back to the two bankers on this panel and about a point that Mr. Venkatram mentioned and about a recent news development that has been flashing on TV screens as we were coming into this hall. This is the latest data from demonetization, which shows that most of the money that has come back into the system out of the 15.8 lakh crore, very little is still left there out in the open market, and all of it has come into the RBI. Mr. Kotak, if I could start with you, and then Mrs. Morparia, do you consider this to be a failure of demonetization?
No, my view is we need to look at demonetization through a philosophy. Right. And I think the message is well beyond numbers. The question is, even if the money has come back or the significant part of the money has come back, it has given trails to the department for analysis to find out what is the ultimate source of the money and finding how much of it is really effectively escape the tax net. Therefore, we should not be looking at demonetization as a single act, but as a part of a broader philosophy where we are saying that we need to make sure that we formalize the Indian economy and move away from what was traditionally the informal sector to a much more clean, knowing what each transaction is kind of a move. And demon in many ways has been the first step in the economic field, which has been a bold, brutal in some sense step, but a step towards a theme. And the theme is black money. We want a cleaner economy. We want even the banking system to be cleansed, which is what the IBC is talking about. So I would weave a thread and a theme rather than looking at narrow numbers alone.
Rather than narrow numbers, so cleaner economy, cleaner system, cleaner corporate structure. Mrs. Morparia, what is your
actually
view?
completely second that.
Right.
Because I think it's very spurious to look at it, okay, if so much money had not come back, that would have been a one-time profit to the government. I don't think this was being done for that purpose. It dramatically changed habits. The rapidity with which digitization took place in the banking segment would not have happened, despite all our efforts, than this one event. And the sheer data that's now collected in terms of people who stuffed money into their accounts, which were inoperative for a long time, now with tools of data mining and what big data can do with that, I think it gives an enormous database, and GST coming so soon on the back of it. So this whole informal economy coming and becoming a part, as I said, we're talking now one India, not one parallel economy doing one thing and Bharat doing one thing.
Right. One big point which we probably need to address and which we're probably not addressing, the elephant in the room, is that while we're talking about a cleaner corporate structure and companies becoming more transparent and clean and the informal sector becoming more formal, how much, Cyril, maybe you would be the best person to answer, how much the Indian state changed in its own ways of dealing with these issues, transparency, accountability, probity? People are still afraid of the taxman.
Yeah. I think there's sort of two sides to this. How is the sort of state dealing with the private sector and how the private sector is sort of responding and thinking as well. I think a lot of changes on the state side happened because of a number of legislation that actually were and sort of policy frameworks which precede in time, most important being RTI. I think it is an incredibly powerful instrument which has no parallel anywhere in the world in terms of the sheer access to information that it kind of provides you. So I think the mental change has started happening from that time. It had its sort of counter effect as well, because it certainly made the bureaucracy more worried about sort of decision making, and it had that slowdown on that process as well. But nonetheless, I think it provided the platform.
Let me ask the two young entrepreneurs here, Vijay and Bhavish, your interactions with the government and your experience with this whole ease of doing business and the government interaction with industry. How has it been? Has there been a lot of change, or is it still slow progress? Because the feedback that you get from a lot of people, and I'm sure some of people, the people out here will agree, is that while things have changed at the central level, when you go down, municipal level, district level, state government level, it's still the same.
Sure. So one thing which which has definitely happened, which probably is more driven by the central government, is the mindset to entrepreneurship and the whole attitude towards entrepreneurs that the central government has tried to change through Startup India programs and through other programs. I think is really commendable, and I can see so much more surge ground up of young entrepreneurs. Of when I go to college now, I feel old. When I go see the kind of ideas, the kind of exciting opportunities people are working on, and almost unanimously, people really credit the central government to having created this environment of encouragement for the young entrepreneurs. So that's one, but our business definitely deals with both state and center. So at the state level, especially at the municipality level, there are still execution challenges, but I think the overall mindset definitely is a big positive.
And the mindset has changed, do you think?
Definitely.
Vijay, your experience?
No change can precipitate the whole system as expected by all of us together, because we are the customers of the change, and it's like the drop in the bucket of ink drop. It takes time to go to every place. What I know is that our top of the government pyramid, top of the governance system, central government and the departments and those people are in a very different mode. They definitely are not just more keen to listen, they're ready to be publicly questioned. I remember the event that happened a few days back in New Delhi, where we had so many secretaries and ministers, and they were nearly like a standing question and answers, which were straightforward, straight shooter questions.
Right.
Why can't this be done if you believe this is to be done, and so on and so forth. And no scripts were, and no question were not to ask, or anything was not done. And those questions were significantly controversial, and then expectations of answers, people were cornered. I don't know when the government was ready to listen to in that tone. Whether they act upon or not, the answer is that every action requires a beginning of it. I think this is the beginning of it. This is the start of it, and then the domino will move to the end domino because the first domino has fallen.
Right, right. One of the side effects, or one of the major effects of disruption that we're talking about, whether it is local competition, whether it's technological change, is the impact on jobs. And we still don't have a clear picture of where we are going with jobs, because the data that we have is insufficient, inadequate, incomplete, not really, gives you the right picture. But I would like to ask this panel, and especially the 3-4 people out here who are directly dealing with this. Rajiv Pratap Rudy, the union minister, recently gave an interview, and he took the example of Ola, and he said that, look, these guys employ some 300, 400,000 drivers. Now, what do you call these guys? Do you call them unemployed, self-employed, employed? Where do they fit in? What category do they fit in? So, given the fact that the nature of this the economy has changed so dramatically, Bhavesh, if I could, ask you,
sure.
the job prospects now, are you really seeing them improve at a section of society that you operate in, because they are the ones who matter?
No, I think I really this point of the government resonates with me, that there's so much more employment being created that might not be captured through our official statistics, right? Just look at our platform. We have now about 700,000 drivers who work with us directly. And indirectly, the number of mechanics who serve them, the number of small eateries around the roadside who serve them are just a multiple of those, right?
Right.
I don't think these are counted officially. And if I look at our industry alone, the next 5 years, the kind of growth that we see in terms of more and more drivers coming in, it'll be a multifold of this. So I think there should be some way for us to formalize how this impact can be measured.
Right.
And one of the understatement that we think is that only the job creation will create, direct job creation will create new jobs, while the formalization, the digitization of a business means there will be more transparency. More transparency will mean there will be more accountability of what you're paying and what is the wages and what kind of people have you kept and structure of that in the support system. I believe that digital, transparent companies will give more jobs than the kind of many other jobs that exist but are not acknowledged.
Right.
But I think on this point, the government has, we've partnered with the government on the skilling initiative, which I believe can be a very impactful initiative for, promoting these kind of jobs which are not formally counted in the economy.
Right. But digital is also about technology. So the kind of jobs that you create, I mean, will it be very different? And will it just widen inequality in society, you think?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. But I want to tell you, technology is a great equalizer, not a divider. And structurally, people with technology are more empowered and more connected to the reality, and they get access to what is not otherwise accessible. So it is an inclusive force. It's not a divisive.
It's not a divisive force, but in your experience, are jobs being created?
100%. I mean, the very fact that the smartphone allows people to become productive citizen. There's a company which we've invested in, we use them very lavishly. It's a translation job, let's say catalog checking jobs, and so on and so forth. These are informal jobs, not very high paying, but 2,000 rupees a month or 3,000 rupees a month being made by someone who was not productive otherwise.
Right, right. Mr. Kotak, if I could ask you about the scenario on jobs. Now, financial services sector has been one big job creator along with information technology. You've talked about the impact of digital and technology in banking and all that. Do you think financial services sector can continue creating jobs at the same pace, or will there be a
I think
slowdown?
You really need to answer this in two parts. Sure. One is what's happening to the structure of financial services, and then what's happening to the future of jobs. So if you look at the structure of financial services, I think we are at a tipping point of three major mega trends.
Right.
First is the industry structure. I think the industry structure in financial services is undergoing a fundamental change, including the fact that within the banking sector, the dominance of the state vis-a-vis the private sector. So I think that is an evolution which is now gathering pace.
Right.
And I think the long-term question is, what are we going to do with this industry structure? And I'm sure the government is thinking about it to find a long-term sustainable solution for how the state functions in the banking sector in the context of the overall banking sector. The second major transformation is that historically, this is within still my first mega trend, is that the financial sector in India historically has been a bank-dominated financial sector. Right. I see that becoming much more a financial services industry, right, where banking is an important component, but not as dominant a component as it has been for last so many years. So the changes around this will have changes about the nature of the jobs. Therefore, in addition to banking, I see the asset management industry, the life insurance industry, the securities industry, and capital markets, both debt and equity, right, beginning to have a lot more legs than in the past. Right. And banks of today will also have to transform their existing models into broader financial services models. So this is one mega trend change, right, which will have a consequent impact on the jobs market as well as the structure of financial services. Sure. The second major change out of the Swachh Bharat program in economics, as we talked about, is significant growth of formal finance versus informal finance. So you can see that in terms of the growth in the mutual fund industry, right, and various other aspects of finance, where you're seeing a leapfrog growth of what was earlier informal money into land and jewelry and everything else getting into formal finance. Right. So this also leads to greater traction of newer opportunities, right, coming into the financial services industry. And the third major one, and here, you know, the most glib word today in any talk is digital, okay? Right. But I'm saying the power of digital in India is not only because of the word digital. It is a digital combined with Aadhaar, which is a very potent mix. A right, Jio could not have got 100 million plus customers, yeah, if biometric was not around in the speed it did. Right. Therefore, similar thing is happening in financial services and banking. Therefore, a combination of digital plus Aadhaar is changing the speed at which things are moving. Right. So, for you take a combination of industry structure, formal finance and digital with Aadhaar, right, it is changing the dynamics of financial services and therefore the nature of jobs. Right. Earlier you had a lot more jobs which were more routine in nature. Right. So I think the challenge to jobs is back to the nature of skilling which we need to do. Right. Okay? And we will find large number of people out of their jobs as they knew it. Historically, a lot of jobs were around tax arbitrage, right, where essentially you had people who needed to be even money handlers, cash handlers. Right. Right. Okay? So that will all change. And how fast can those people be reskilled? And obviously the newer people and younger people will find it easier to get reskilled. And therefore the noise around jobs will come because of a huge mismatch between the new needs versus the existing skills. Right. Right. And that noise should not color the direction in which we are going.
Right. Mr. Venkatram, that's an important point that Mr. Kotak is making. How are we doing on skilling? How are we doing on actually retraining people, training them for the current needs of the job market?
Well, if I just move back a little and say that I don't look at it as job, I look at it as work. Because I truly think that a few years from now, a lot of people won't really have jobs, they will just have work to do. Right. And if you look at it in that context to say, this is not a place I'm going to join and I'm going to retire from at the age of 60, but this is what I'm good at doing today and this is what I want to do today and right, tomorrow. Right. And it is actually a social contract of a different kind. It's at the simple individual level, it's his own social contract right, with himself in a sense to say that I need to ensure that I keep myself literate or trained or skilled right, to do the next piece of work that comes to me. Right.
So you're talking more about entrepreneurship and self-employment?
No, I'm even talking about the fact that if you look at work of the future, the workforce of the future is also going to be partly a floating workforce. Right. It's not going to be a workforce that is employed with a job as we know it today. Right. So what's really going to happen is that you will have a lot of people who say that for this particular set of tasks, I'm going to outsource it. Right. And the way in which you would outsource it would vary. Either you would go to an agency which provides you the people, the aggregators who get it on their websites, right, or it could be, solo players or freelancers like you had in the old days when you had SAP implementations, right, etc. Right. But you will have a larger floating workforce rather than everyone who's really tied into a job as we know it today.
Right.
So in that context, the social contract is one in terms of the individual having to learn all the time. The fact that the companies in which people work would also need to be ready to learn for the future.
Right.
Because they're not going to be doing repetitive tasks for the rest of their lives or doing the same task forever.
Right. Right.
And the third is that I think at a certain level, the government would also have to see how they regulate it. Right. And that's where I would really hope that things like service tax and the like become a little easier, because it becomes very difficult in such a scenario if you do get taxed in various ways.
Of course, and I'm sure a lot of people here will agree with you on this. But Bhavish, if I could just take you on what Mr. Venkatram has been saying. Are you seeing the kind of change among the workforce that you are employing, or probably?
Oh, completely. I think it's already happening, and I don't think we or the public in general is aware of the extent of the happenings, right? For example, we have a fairly large business of two-wheeler taxi drivers, especially in some cities.
Right.
You know, they drive on our platform. Sometimes they do food delivery on other platforms. Sometimes they do e-commerce logistics delivery. Sometimes they become agents for insurance. They're already floating, and the number of these jobs, and again, technology helps create these opportunities for these people, because on a phone they can access all these different apps for companies and become supply agents for those different companies.
Right.
And I think it will only accelerate.
And that's something that is probably not being captured very well. Thank you very much, and once again, enjoy your evening, and thank you for being here. Thank you, the panelists.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.